Dan, I'm just in the cold pressed juice aisle in Air One. Can I call you back?
My
Can we maybe do the podcast a bit later? Is that all right?
You need to leave Air One right now and hop on a plane out of LA.
Well, the good news is I have already done so. So almost 18 hours later, I am back from Los Angeles in Doha. That was a trek from the other side of the world, literally.
You lucky listeners that you have not had to talk to Alex this week. Every time I've got a text, I've been like, oh, this again.
Don't be salty, shady about the fact that you were not in California and I was for the last week, because you're American. I mean, this is supposedly your territory, so I don't know why you had so much FOMO.
Yeah, may I remind you, I can move to LA tomorrow if I want to. Good luck with that.
Okay, we get it, and that's fine. But the point was, you were not there this week, and you couldn't hide your frustration with that. But I have just got back, as I say, from
Los Angeles, City of Angels, LA,
City of Angels, Hollywood, Beverly Hills. Take your pick.
You know, I was on a flight the other day and a guy started talking to us, an American, and we're like, oh, so where are you from? He's like, well, I grew up in Hollywood. I'm just like, who says that? No one says that, especially
I feel like I would say that.
Yeah, you would. Not someone who actually grew up there.
Well, no, I'm saying I would say that if I grew up there. I wouldn't just say that in general. Thank you very much.
You're the one who's been calling me an Angeleno, episode 1 through 3. That's hard to say. But now you are the real Angeleno here.
Okay, I have probably always been a bit more, quote, Angeleno in terms of, my desire for an avocado toast in the morning, my like for the sunshine and so on. But what I do is, in order to keep you in check, throughout our friendship, I've always made sure that I divert and deflect into convincing people you are the woke Angeleno and that I'm anything but that. When in reality, and this last 7 days kind of brought this to the surface, the reality is you're probably much more low-key and less Angeleno than me, who is ordering my second round of avocado toast for the day, sitting next to two delightful ladies from Santa Barbara who I met at breakfast.
Shout out to Nicole and Kim, right?
Yes, Nicole and Kim, this is the shout out to both. But you were invaluable on my journey from Doha to Los Angeles because, of course, I did decide to let you know I was airborne, and it is one of the longest flights in the world. So, your company was appreciated until it wasn't, until it very much wasn't.
So what happened was that last week, right after we stopped recording, Alex went, oh, by the way, I might be going to the US soon. I had to run. So I was like, yeah, okay, tell me about it tomorrow. I text him the next morning. So when are you going to LA? He's like, hello from QR7, whatever. I am currently airborne to LA. And immediately I went on Flight Radar 24, of course, to see where Alex was. And would you know, very, very relevant to the podcast, things we've discussed in several episodes now, Alex was cruising over Kazakhstan, just south of Russia.
And this was firstly unusual because while most of the Gulf flights will overfly Russia, unlike a lot of airlines right now because of what is happening with Ukraine, the usual route that will fly from Doha will usually take more of a westerly route that basically heads towards Northern Europe, up towards the North Pole, and then down through Canada, sometimes even Alaska, and into California. Dan surprised me because I was busy working away. I hadn't even turned on the screen, and he WhatsApped me and said, you're heading towards Asia and then you're crossing into Russia and you're going that way, and it never goes that way. And I was thinking, no, he's wrong, because I know that it very rarely takes the route that goes basically when you're looking at the map and you're looking at the Gulf, right instead of left.
Yeah.
But it did on that morning. That was unusual. You really surprised me. I was shocked. I was messaging you, what? We look at radar, we follow flights, we fly so much ourselves that it sometimes takes a bit to surprise us.
Yeah. In my mind, I was thinking, Alex, do they have Four Seasons or JW Marriott in Novosibirsk? Because I hope you know the locations in case you have to divert.
Yeah. And these are the lovely, helpful and polite private messages that you were sending me while I was cruising over these areas, and wondering if they were A, relevant, B, appropriate, and C, when will the Wi-Fi cut out so I can stop receiving these notifications from my podcast co-hosts who couldn't wait to tell me, oh, if you were to divert now, this would be the shady third secondary city airport that you would end up in that's currently on the receiving end of these sanctions, and this embassy will be notified, and this would likely happen. And I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe it was better when aircraft didn't have Wi-Fi in terms of being able to disconnect. You know, I said to Dan, oh, I think the Wi-Fi's playing up, Dan. Whoop. Off airplane mode, off Wi-Fi, turn on that screen, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of what was a 17-hour flight to Los Angeles.
I mean, you have to admit, I was very knowledgeable. I said, okay, I assume when you land, they've arranged PS services for you. You went, what on earth is that? I don't think so.
I hadn't heard of PS. Yeah, I hadn't
fast
heard
forward.
of PS. That was good. Fast forward to me landing in LA. PS was the service that. What does PS stand for?
Private service? Wait. It can't be PS services. Private is private something.
Maybe because it's in California, like private sunshine services?
No, it's not.
Private secret service?
Okay, it doesn't matter.
Anyway, it's a service that basically you can enter the US in a much, much, much faster fashion. You kind of go to a mini terminal. Ryan Gosling was in the room next door being processed for his departure.
No, he
I'm not sure where he was
wasn't.
traveling to, but he was on the other side of the wall. He was. I saw him go in. Apparently, Adele is constantly there in her commuting back and forth to Vegas, where her show is. So that was a nice, easy way to enter the United States, which can sometimes be awful in terms of queues and so on. And then headed down or up. I can't remember.
Well, it is up,
direction.
but it's
up. It is
down
up, yeah.
toward town. I don't know what you say.
Yeah. So headed up then towards the Beverly Hills area. Actually, Dan, the weather was much cooler than I was expecting for LA in September. But on the whole, you know, sunny, there's nice LA vibes, and it is. And I do love a lot about California. The palm trees, the wide roads, the fact that
Palm trees.
I like the palm trees. I like
They're very
the wide
skinny,
roads.
right? They're
Yeah, but
Ozempic palm trees.
Yeah, well, I think, don't they use, isn't it Wegovy that
I don't
is
know
more
the
of
type.
the...
Oh yeah.
one.
Wegovy.
It is.
I think it's called.
Wegovy. Okay, Wegovy. There we go. Don't Google that.
No.
If you're unaware, I mean, it's just, we're not endorsing any of these products. And anyway, just the fact that everything is, you know, everything's just bigger and therefore seems better. I mean, it continuously in the US catches me off guard when you order food and they bring you like,
Right.
oh, it's not a side plate of mushrooms. It's like a bucket of mushrooms. And I'm like,
You could feed
like
your
a
whole
bucket
family.
of mushrooms. Yeah, I'm like, this is for me. Or, you know, I'll have 2 hash browns, please, at breakfast with my avocado toast. And they bring something that looks like this, like, frittata omelette thing that's the size of a full plate.
Yeah. One thing I think that you were consciously or subconsciously, you felt this. The one thing you notice when you go to the US more than almost any other country is just that it feels like the main character place. Like you land and you're just like, you just immediately get this vibe that this is where it's happening. Yeah. The attitude everyone has is that this is the center of the world. And, you know, especially in LA, the center of entertainment. So you just feel very impressed because everyone else is giving that vibe.
You explain that perfectly. It is that exactly. It's tangible. You can feel how it is this place that knows it's so relevant. And it's like you've stepped into a real life movie scene. And of course, because as, you know, international kids, we consume so much globally of the output of California that when you are then there, it is like you recognize everything, even if you haven't been to that area, even if you haven't been to that place, because we've consumed it somewhere in the background of something, be it movie or TV or whatever. Then also you get this, I mean, the sense of, as you say, for example, I arrived to the hotel, right? Checked in within seconds. I get into the elevator and the gentleman standing next to me is the former chief of staff to Bill Clinton. He worked with both Bill and then Hillary when she became Secretary of State. Now, you know me, I'm hugely into politics and US politics. I consume everything politics. So, of course, I recognized him. And he smiled and he said hi because, again, something that catches you off guard in the US, or at least catches me off guard every single time, is how forward everyone is in being willing to, to speak with you. I guess we still have that kind of British, the more reserved way of not directly saying like, good morning, how was your day? That kind of thing. So when I got into the elevator, he said, hey, how's it going? Which floor? And I said, 4, please. And then he said, how's your morning going so far? And I said, actually, I just arrived from a very long flight. And I said to him, you served in the Clinton administration, right? He said, yes. He said, that's guilty, that's me. And I wondered if he thought it was ordinary that I knew that or not, because he was not really
or that he was going to get
hate
crime.
A politician.
Poor
yeah,
guy.
I mean, it's funny. He said guilty, and I was thinking, goodness.
Yeah. Should I get off here?
Let's not go down that route.
We need to get into aviation.
Yes.
I know you were stalking celebrities, but what else?
No, I was bumping into them in elevators. There's a difference. We will move on. I also sat next to Justin Bieber for 3 hours in Soho House. Very nice guy.
Trust
very
me,
nice,
guys,
very
I
chill.
heard about it. Yeah.
Very nice, very chill. He was there. He was having a meeting. We were sat on the sofas. Of course, Soho House, the members only club/hotel.
Of course.
If you take your phone out, you risk being shot. So I have no photographic evidence with Justin, but
to be honest, I was very surprised that he was there, because no shade to Soho House, but I don't feel like it's a sort of hidden, exclusive place where celebrities still go. Like, I think that's what it was back in the day.
Apparently, it is.
Well, Justin Bieber. Anyway, let's move on.
When was the last time you went to Soho House in West Hollywood?
Excuse me, I've had my fair share.
I think that answers your question. Okay, so did I do? Yeah, I didn't ask. Did I do aviation? Did I do aviation related things in California? Yes. So there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. First and foremost, there was something called the Apex Awards, and there was an Apex Expo as well, which gathers parts of the industry. So I attended that expo whilst in California. That was down in Long Beach in the South, and
Thanks for the geography lesson.
That's okay. This is your California expert, Alex Macheras, just guiding you here. They gather in-flight entertainment providers, they gather catering, and they gather all different areas of the sector to do business. At the same time, they had the awards ceremony. And so they were giving multiple awards. I attended and covered the ceremony. The awards itself covered and awarded airlines, but also its most notable award was the Lifetime Achievement Award to an airline CEO. And the recipient on this occasion was the CEO of Qatar Airways, Akbar Al-Bakr, and he received the Lifetime Achievement Award for his 26 plus years leading the Gulf carrier. And so they really, really put emphasis on what a big deal this award was to an airline that so many are familiar with in the global brand. In addition to the Lifetime Achievement Award, they had awarded airlines for a bunch of different areas and categories, including in how accessible, friendly airlines can be in terms of accommodating, for example, wheelchairs on board in premium cabins, for having lavatories that are able to be a bit easier to use for a certain variety of disabilities, and so on. And so it was nice to really see the specific things. And then there was, of course, in-flight entertainment and gate-to-gate Wi-Fi and so on. That was the awards part. And then, of course, you have that thought as to, okay, they then start to award airlines, 4-star airlines, 3-star airlines, 5-star airlines. And that's when you start to look and wonder, is this the case?
Okay, so the obvious airline that I was like, WTF. But there were many WTF 5-star airlines. SAS awarded 5-star airline by Apex. I was like, is this a joke? What date is it?
That's the thing with these, with awarding airlines with a star rating, is that ultimately there is always going to be disagreement. I don't think, Dan, there's ever going to be in our lifetime an organization that awards airlines the recognition and the star rating that we perceive to be accurate. And I think that's just going to be it's going to be different for me, it's going to be different for you and someone else, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's just so much harder. And I was also thinking while I was sat in this ceremony, I was thinking, isn't it funny? I wonder if in the hotel industry they also dispute this and say, "Oh, can you imagine that this hotel was given 5 stars when it is
I
actually,
mean, it's true.
But I just
Some hotels are like, say they're 5 stars, and I'm like, you show up and
how?
you're like, what?
Yeah, yeah. So it is, it is unusual, but yeah, SAS 5 stars, best, given that they are one of your local airlines as well, and you've flown them extensively, but also you follow the ins and outs. What, in a nutshell, would you say just from the get go stops them from being 5 star?
Okay, I can list a bunch of recent changes. They're going through a lot of financial strife. Of course, I hope that they prevail from that and that they can grow a sustainable operation. But there are so many things that just don't make them a 5 star airline in any way. Just an example, my brother appears in episode 4 as well. He was flying from
Goodness,
Chicago.
he's quickly becoming the main character.
Yeah, I know, right? Welcome, Jacob. He was flying from Chicago to Copenhagen, SAS economy. They did not serve dinner. They served a sandwich the size of, I don't know, the sandwich the size of an iPhone for dinner in economy on an 8-hour long haul flight. That's when you know it gets bad.
What?
Yeah. I mean, the
Wait,
cost
this
cutting.
was because of what? This was a catering mistake, or this is planned?
No, so he asked the crew, they said, this is what we serve nowadays. This is new. So they've downgraded their meals on long haul flights. They're also barely serving breakfast on earlier departures. They've cut back on everything they can possibly cut back,
Except that fares, of course, for passengers
Of
were still
course.
paying through the roof for this substandard subpar service.
Yeah, so there's just some very, very basic things. Long haul economy also, passengers get one free drink with the first meal. If there's a second meal, they get another free drink. No free drinks in between, not even water. So you have to pay if you want water
That's
on
mad.
on an 11-hour flight from Europe to California. No free water.
I'm guessing
mid-flight.
you can still have tap water for free. But my recommendation is that this should be absolutely avoided.
Yeah.
Because that system of which the water is being dispensed from, I mean, just without going too much into the detail, make a mental note now that if you are offered tap water on an aircraft, even if they call it and refer to it as drinking water, decline it, because that is not something that you want to be consuming. This is not Angelino Alex speaking. This is ordinary, regular Alex giving you this advice, because it's just don't do it.
But
So-
do you
so
do
don't
you
it.
drink warm water like tea or coffee? Well, I know you don't drink coffee.
See, I'm funny about. See, I would have green tea, for example, on the ground, and let's not talk about aviation. But in the air, I actually don't have hot drinks for the same reason, because I'm just not keen on the fact that that water. I just know the system that it's coming from. Even on a new aircraft, it is a minefield in terms of the bacteria, and also aircraft are not going to be differentiating their systems between where the water is going. So, for example, the water that is coming out of the tap in the bathroom and the water that is coming out of the tap in the galley, while they refer to it as being different, on most aircraft, the supply is exactly the same. And that's where you start to realize, okay, maybe this is now, of course, there's arguments about bringing it to boiling point and for tea and coffee, which would kill bacteria and so on and so on. So that's different. But the rule of thumb generally is, for me anyway, I absolutely avoid it.
Yeah, okay. I'm fine with drinking it hot. I drink tea on almost all my flights. Never been sick. I don't have any parasites as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I would not drink it if it wasn't boiled. But those are just a few examples of why SAS is not 5 star. And no, I think usually they're not allowed to offer you tap water because they want people to buy. I'm looking here at some of the other 5 star airlines, and this is not meant to roast Apex, but I just question what criteria goes into this. So some of the other airlines they gave 5 stars were Lufthansa, United, LATAM. We're talking about airlines being put in the same category as Etihad and EVA, two of the world's actual best airlines. So to me, it's just it's
you
nonsense.
can't. I mean, when you have Singapore Airlines moving into the category as all of these and the others, it's just that's when the questions start to be raised. I will say that Apex's criteria is far more transparent and far more passenger involved than the likes of, for example, Skytrax, which of course have had a questionable record with many different scenarios that they have been through over the last few years. If you remember, just a few years ago, Turkish Airlines, they had a questionable record with many different scenarios that they have been through over the last few years. If you remember, just a few years ago, Turkish Airlines released a statement saying that they want to be exempt from Skytrax's audits. They no longer wanted to take part because they said that ultimately it wasn't in their best interest and they didn't feel the process was transparent enough. And they also said that because they were refusing to comply with certain orders, if you like, from Skytrax, then Turkish Airlines, and this is all coming from the airline, by the way, Turkish Airlines said, leave us out. And what happened that year? Skytrax made Lufthansa 5-star, and Turkish Airlines genuinely can be one of the best airlines in the world. Turkish Airlines 3-star, and it just that always sits, that still bothers me to say that really, I think, really discredited the rating system there.
Yeah.
But the weird part, of course, is that Turkish Airlines is now back in Skytrax, isn't it?
The point of this is don't trust these ratings. Don't use them as a reference
Not
for
too
what to
much
book.
anyway.
Yeah, there's, it's general knowledge which regions have better airlines. I think it's always good to compare different, unbiased sources. Of course, if Alex or I like a specific airline, compare it to other people as well, because people have different preferences, different opinions. Don't just trust these corporations that...
No, use them slightly as an indicator. And in many circumstances, for example, with Skytrax can get it right. Really, they can. And there are scenarios where, of course, you see a winner and you think, how on earth did that happen? But that wasn't just it in LA. In LA, sideline discussions were happening. I met with several airline executives basically deciding and discussing how they are going to move forward with addressing the fact that around the world, multiple airlines have collectively together accumulated a $120 million bill, all thanks to the failure of the UK's air traffic control provider, NATS, that of course happened a few weeks ago. So when UK ATC basically went down, and it was a part of the ATC, it wasn't the provision of air traffic control services, but it was related to how flight data was processed. The impact on airlines all around the world with services to the UK was felt in moments, and it lasted for quite a while too. In this aftermath period now, Dan, we have a situation where NATS don't actually have to pay anything for what they have been, for the chaos that they had caused. But the airlines are now figuring out who's going to be paying the $120 million bill if it's not NATS. And so that's what they were grouping together. And I met with some who were trying to figure out how on earth they get them to pay.
That's absolutely ridiculous. Just look at the airlines. If the airlines delay your flight and it's within their control, for example, system errors, they are liable for compensation. Why should NATS not at least have to help the airlines in a situation where they are responsible for the meltdown? The airlines had nothing to do with this. They were trying their best to get their operations back up and running. There were so many knockoff delays for so many days that airlines are also going to be liable for all types of compensation to passengers as an effect.
This is what is not fair. And I think the optics of this was fantastic because you've got NATS, this British National Air Traffic Service provider, which is the one that is notorious now for its failures. Ryanair outspoken CEO Michael O'Leary just says that they are, quote, a joke in terms of how they go down. And then they just say, oh, apologies, and move on. And there's this mammoth bill left behind. But the optics of this I thought were particularly interesting because you literally have a group of airlines, and I met with several of their CEOs in Los Angeles on the other side of the world to the United Kingdom. All of these airlines, none of them were British, so they were all carriers that serve the UK but are not UK-based airlines. And they're all gathering together, trying to work out, right, how are we going to get NATS to pay? And they are plotting and they're outlining their roadmap. So NATS should probably see this coming because they are not willing to let go and simply swallow this $120 million bill. And I get it because the margins in aviation are so tiny. Why should they now have to clean up for the hiccup of a almost routinely failing national air traffic service provider in the UK that has this recent history of constant outages, over the space of a couple of years? Yeah, but it's still too many.
Now that we have been talking for ages, should we get into the news?
Let's have a look at what else is making headlines in the aviation world.
So before we get into that, Alex and I both travel a lot for work, as you all know, and sometimes even simple things like deciding which hotel to book or what to do in a new city can become overwhelming when there are so many other things to do.
That's right, but luckily it is 2023 and we no longer have to do all of this research by ourselves. Magic is a powerful AI tool that takes the planning out of your trips, both for business and leisure. It customizes itineraries for you based on your needs and preferences. So Dan, you can be sure to get your Angeleno vegan oat milk fix while you're on the road.
And Alex, you can always stay at a hotel in the vicinity of a Soho house so you don't have a panic attack.
Wow, look, Magic can also tell you more specific things like what to pack for a trip. It even compiles a list of what people are saying about hotels and restaurants online, so you know exactly which places to book and reserve and what to expect when you get there.
The best part is that Magic is 100% free. What's more, every time you book through Magic, you collect Magic Elixir, which can then be used to get other deals between 5 and 40% off on future bookings.
So let's travel like it's 2023 and use Magic to plan your next trip. Follow the link in the podcast notes below, or you can go to magictravel.ai.
So in the US this week, a certain someone, okay, I have to say, Donald Trump basically slammed Boeing and the 737 MAX. Of course, looking back a few years when Donald Trump was president, this was when the two infamous 737 MAX crashes occurred. He was actually the one who forced through the grounding in the US, right?
He did, yeah. He really pushed Boeing into declaring that, oh, we're grounding them here, and then that was kind of the final point. Okay, this aircraft is going to be grounded.
Because what was the FAA doing? That was a crazy goosebumps moment where you felt that a safety organization is putting economic interests before safety. But what has Donald Trump said this week?
So Donald Trump, of course, is not on Twitter, or he's not very active on X, as it's now known. Instead, he has his own one, Truth Social. And he has released a statement this week, and it's aviation's turn for a Donald Trump statement. And the former president says, bad maintenance Boeing. He says, okay, I can't do it. I can't do it all in his voice.
It's tremendous.
No, it's too long. He says, bad maintenance Boeing, that they should not lengthen the unattractive, fat, slow.
Is he describing himself? I'm sorry.
Right. He says the unattractive, fat, slow 737. To get a larger plane, they should go instead to an updated, fast, beautiful, because everything in his life is so beautiful, sleek 757 praying mantis.
The praying mantis. I love that.
He goes on, he says, it is the commercial pilot's favorite plane to fly. He said, had they have listened to me years ago, they wouldn't have had the disaster that is known as the 737 MAX. And then he turns a little bit serious and he says, those two horrible tragedies would never have happened. And then, of course, he goes back to being ironic Trump again. And he says, as they say, Trump was right about everything. And it's okay.
We're going to lose half our followers, but it's okay.
No, we are quoting the former president word for word.
Yes,
okay?
sorry.
And that's it. That's his statement on his own social media. So Trump here laying into Boeing.
Yeah, this is amazing. He loves giving nicknames. The fact that he is giving Boeing the nickname Bad Maintenance Boeing. I can't believe his nicknames have reached aviation.
I know. And do you know what? Sometimes he's not wrong. I mean, it's not, of course, Boeing are going to take issue with this, but it is funny how aviation have now had that turn on whatever day he released his statement over the last few days. It's also funny that a lot of what he has said about Boeing should have actually have updated the 757 is something that is the consensus across much of the industry. Much of the aviation sector agrees that the Boeing 757, which is that very thin, long aircraft
the pencil
that would typically rival the A321, which of course came much later, that is the aircraft that many wish were updated instead of Boeing rushing to re-engine the 737, which of course was a 60-year-old airframe, and now it becoming the 737 MAX, which of course has had a very troubled recent history.
Yeah, the 757 is such a beautiful amazing plane. As a passenger, sure, it's a narrow body, so it's not ideal, but everyone loves the 757. It's so sleek. He's right.
Who is it
Beautiful,
still? If I
sleek.
mean, I'm just thinking, who is still actively operating them
Of course,
globally?
Iceland Air is, I think, the
Yeah,
only European airline. The US,
yeah.
you have Delta and United. So
Delta.
United
In
flies
fact,
them.
I saw one as soon as I landed in LA. I saw a Delta 757.
So beautiful. So Delta and United also fly some of those to Europe. We have DHL flies 757s. I don't know if
Yeah.
there's not really any other big airlines, at least off the top of my head, that fly them anywhere else anymore, which is so sad. I had a funny thought. So let's say Tupolev was still around. Tupolev is a former Russian, Ukrainian, Soviet aircraft manufacturer. So do you think if they were still around, he would have gone, you shouldn't buy from bad maintenance Boeing, you should buy from tremendous Tupolev.
Potentially. I mean, we know that the former president has always had strong links to
Yeah.
Russia. Could they have been the ones to be the new Trump jet? And of course, Donald Trump still has his 757, which is, of course, why he has this attachment to this aircraft. He has recently renovated the interior. If you Google Donald Trump 757, you can see a picture of the former president sat eating from a bucket of KFC in this very sleek gold kind of Emirates style looking, but much more lack of taste. And of course, he has the whole gold washrooms and gold toilet seats and so on. But where I am with the former president is on this fact that potentially the effort should have been put into a better 757 than what we have today with the 737 Max.
I love hearing people who really have very little to do with aviation suddenly share their opinion about aviation.
Yeah.
When someone just shared like completely out of nowhere, like, oh, I love this airline or I love this and that, you're just like, you think about this stuff too? It just makes me happy.
It's so true.
Talking about US
Yeah.
carriers, actually, there's
Yeah.
issues not only with the Boeing family, but now there's a whole fake parts scandal. So airlines all over the world are having to ground aircraft. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this is affecting airlines globally. And so far, the number of aircraft that is affecting is limited to around 100. So, on the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. But this is something that has rocked the aviation sector because we are in the middle of what we have discovered to be a fake jet engine parts scandal. Basically, this all comes back from a British aerospace parts supplier known as AOG Technics. They have been found to have forged certification documents for dozens of parts that are not legitimate certified aircraft engine parts for the CFM. So this is typically an engine that will be on the two of the world's most popular aircraft types. The Airbus A320, that's an aircraft that lands or takes off every 2.5 seconds, or the 737, which of course is landing and taking off at the same rate globally because these are the workhorses of the skies, the A320 and the 737. And we know that these engine parts were fake ultimately. The certification also had never come about because they had not followed the correct processes and they were being sold by a third party supplier, British Aerospace Parts AOG. The origin of the parts is not yet known, but they are in aircraft engines around the world. And Southwest were the first airlines to discover this. And then, of course, they send this memo out globally to all airlines. And I have been reliably informed that 2 airlines in the Middle East are affected, but also there are airlines across the US, including American and United. There are a couple of airlines in India. There are a couple of airlines in Europe, and so on and so on. It's again another concern for the industry to be worried about, I guess, which is that actually, just like there are counterfeit products in all areas of life, we have just discovered this now for engine parts, and that is
It's
particularly
scary.
concerning.
It's really scary. We often talk about this, how it's remarkable that things don't go wrong more often than they do. So here we have
Thank God.
100 aircraft grounded with fake parts, and thankfully nothing has happened. But this is just one situation. There's so many small issues here and there, and thankfully pretty much all of the time, 99.9999% of the time, everything is still fine with all the complexities. of aviation. It just shows you how incredibly, safe and controlled everything is.
Regulated.
Yeah.
It's we are extremely regulated. We are extremely restricted in terms of how the sector has to comply with policies and protocol. And thankfully, air travel does remain the absolute safest form of transport. And I get asked this all the time by listeners on my radio pieces, and after I have broadcast on TV, I get passengers who are nervous about flying, and they will message me saying, is there a particular part that I should be more nervous about?
I get so many messages from viewers like, how are you so happy and smiley on flights when I'm on the verge of tears? I tell them, if you ever feel bad, the best thing you can do is tell the crew. They might inform the pilots. You'll get help, you'll get comfort. I think getting to meet and talk to the pilots is a really helpful, comforting thing, because sometimes you don't feel in control. You don't feel like, some strange figure is flying.
The most common thing, I think, stems from that lack of control. And I'll quickly tell you this short story. When I was 7 or 8 years old, we were flying back, myself and my family were flying back to London. And back then, airlines are much better at this now. But back then, we're talking like 20 years ago, when an airline would call in another airline to operate on their behalf, they wouldn't then let the passengers know. There was not an email culture to say, oh, your flight is actually going to be operated by this airline tomorrow, and so on and so on. So my mother at the time was a real nervous passenger. Even though she was flying almost every weekend, she didn't like it at all. And we were on the bus going to the gate. This was at Malaga. And as we were heading for an EasyJet flight, the bus pulls up at this MD-80, this very, very old, at that point, it was already almost 30 years old, aircraft that had an all-white livery, totally unbranded. And the guy driving the bus says, okay, this is the EasyJet flight. And everyone was super confused. And they said, yeah, it's on this flight today. It's on this aircraft. And people were boarding and unsure. And my mum, I remember her taking one look out of that bus window and she said, nope, I'm not going on that. Absolutely not. She said, they should have told us. Okay. She said, I have no idea what airline it is. I have no idea where the aircraft is registered. I don't know the safety reputation of this airline. It is not fair. There is so much that passengers cannot control. When you're nervous, that's what plays on their mind. It's not then fair to put that passenger in a position where, surprise, you mentally prepared yourself for XYZ, but actually it's ABC. They brought the flight crew out of the flight deck to come down to the bus to speak to my mother and convince her to board. She wouldn't do it. And the crew was saying, please, madam, it's safe. We're a leasing airline based in Lithuania. I think that just made it a bit worse.
Your mom went, where?
20 years ago. Exactly. And she refused. And I remember being 7, 8 years old and not blaming her for the fact that she was ready. She knew exactly what airline and aircraft she had booked and was flying. And it's not just that they swapped an aircraft. This was an airline out of nowhere with no prior communication 20 years ago with an unbranded MD-80. That's not an aircraft that flies around very much at all.
If you lived in
Nowadays, I don't even know
Gothenburg,
where you would.
Yeah, then you'd.
They're still flying in Gothenburg?
No, not anymore. But I grew up flying the MD-80 because SAS flew it everywhere from Gothenburg.
Okay. Well, apart from Gothenburg, of course, it wasn't in service anywhere else. So I didn't blame them. So yeah, I'm always sympathetic to passengers with that feeling of just not being in control, and it's not fair for airlines to make that worse.
No, absolutely not. So I feel like we're already sort of talking about listener concerns. Should we get into some questions?
Yes, let's do it. Let's go to your questions.
Okay, so Tom asks me, what do you think about the Delta SkyMiles changes? I'm going to very, very quickly just explain what happened in the past week. Delta, of course, one of the biggest airlines in the world. They have always had, or for the past decade or so, they have stripped away a lot at their frequent flyer program. But this past week, they really took those quote unquote enhancements, which are actually great devaluations, to a new extreme. So basically, now, if you want to earn Delta's highest status, you have to spend, depending on which credit cards you have, because everything is based on how much you spend with the airline. There's no points don't matter, miles don't matter, number of flights don't matter. If you want to earn the highest status, you need to spend between $350,000 and $700,000 on your Delta credit card.
What?
Which is just, it's so crazy because if you're thinking about even someone spending $350,000 a year on one credit card, this is an insanely rich person. To think that they will be super grateful that, oh, I get priority boarding, I get an extra bag, I get an upgrade once every 10 flights because Delta and US Airlines have done a great job at monetizing first class and selling more and more seats in the past decade. To think that they will think it's worth it to spend all their money on this card or to go out of their way to spend more to get these benefits when they already make and spend so much money is bizarre. It doesn't make sense. People with that type of spend.
Isn't like the benefit of, for example, the priority boarding benefit? Am I right in saying that priority boarding would mean that you're like the 7th category to board after they've called everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, you can get like an invite-only status, for example, in the US. Each airline has one where you board before anyone else, but that doesn't really matter. Look, if you're spending, let's keep it on the low end, $350,000, you're unlikely to be flying economy, especially long haul. So just to think that this person will be super grateful for one extra checked bag that's worth $25 or being able to board with group 3 it's bizarre. So
that's the dream.
Yeah, my God, I've spent almost $1 million to be in group 3. This just points to the current economic climate and the climate in travel, especially, where airlines are the ones with the control. Consumers are victims at the hand of the airlines because airlines are making record profits. Their flights are full. They don't care about the passengers in times like these. And this is such a great example of that.
So that nicely brings us on to the second question. This is a question that I received from 3 different listeners, Josh, John, and Pablo. And they basically each asked the same question, which is, why is air travel so expensive currently? And when will these fares go down? What is going on? The quick answer to this is supply and demand. It isn't just the fact that air travel has decided to become more expensive and that aircraft are still half empty, and so they are just keeping fares artificially high. Aircraft are packed. Dan knows we both have access to the system of the world's marketplace of airline tickets, and with that we're able to make a very reliable assessment by bringing up this data on how busy flights are. Let me just tell you, flights everywhere are packed. They have never been so busy. And so because of supply and demand, only those highest fares tend to be available compared with, for example, pre-pandemic, where aircraft were just not as busy. There were more flights, there was more access, and that's what's making it more difficult now. But the reality is that because aircraft are so full, it's only those higher fares that are available. And so long as demand continues to be so high, and so long as the airlines struggle to meet that demand with a limited supply because there are not enough aircraft around, there are definitely not enough engines, there are aircraft stuck in maintenance awaiting spare parts, the supply chain in aviation is a mess, that will continue to hurt the consumer with high prices. It's going to be a while until they come down.
So one part of me thinks that, okay, when more aircraft are delivered, the supply chain is sorted out, when this pent-up demand from COVID in every country has gone down, hopefully prices go down. But another part of me is a little bit worried that, well, selfishly worried that the whole new experience economy and the idea that people want to buy experiences and trips instead of things is here to stay, which means that people will be willing for all eternity to spend more on travel, want to travel more just because it's a new priority for people. And, consumer tastes change. This might just be the new thing. Hopefully not, but we'll see.
Another question. This is from Leah. Leah is our lovely listener in Florida. She has said, what are your thoughts, guys, on strategically taking up a whole row, so a whole empty row, once everyone has already boarded and boarding has been declared as complete? She also says, especially when the flight is quite full. What are your thoughts? My quick thought is that if you know that boarding is complete and you see an empty row, go for it.
Sometimes I think it's good to ask the crew first, because depending on how
Oh,
empty
100,
the
sorry,
flight is.
100%.
Yeah.
I would go for it, and then I would ask the crew, is it fine to stay here?
Yes.
That's the way I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason you should ask the crew is that some flights could be so empty
be
that,
reserved.
or you need to stay in your seat due to weights and balances for takeoff
Yeah.
and landing if the flight is super, super empty. So then you might just need to stay until after takeoff.
It could also be reserved for crew who are going to be resting during the flight and so on, depending on certain aircraft configurations that can happen. So definitely, I would say identify it, maybe make your way over there before somebody else does, and then say to the crew, is it fine to sit here? They might say to you in some circumstances, you can, but after takeoff. And again, that could be to do with, as Dan said, the distribution of weight and balance on an aircraft. But otherwise, I think that's fine. The next question is from Sam. He says, how are airports like London Heathrow going to cope in a world without A380s? So he means the super jumbo that are able to squeeze in loads and loads of passengers. And actually, on an A380, it's not a squeeze. I shouldn't have said that, because it's one of the most spacious economy class experiences out there. Sam says, with limited slots, it's going to be challenging to get the same capacity in and out of these hubs from aircraft like the 777, A350 and 787s. He's absolutely right. And this is why, Sam, that the A380s are still in service for many carriers, because if A380s, for all that is wrong with the business side of the A380 in terms of how much money they lose, too many engines, too much fuel required, extremely heavy, struggles to break even, it is an aircraft that is perfectly designed for those slot constrained airports where you have airlines that want to be able to fly more to those airports, but the airports are so full, like London Heathrow, they work in a strict slot system, that was a mouthful, and say that the only way to bring in more passengers is to fly bigger aircraft. And airlines that I've spoken to about this have said that they hope that the 777X and the A350-1000 will be able to accommodate that in the future going forward, as passengers, we demand further frequency rather than larger aircraft.
Yeah, it's really difficult. The most notable example is obviously Emirates, who flies 6 or 7 A380s. I think it's 6 into just London Heathrow every day. They don't have any more slots they can use, as far as I'm aware. So what happens when they don't have the A380 anymore? Now they're talking about flying it into the 2040s, just for airports like Heathrow, which is insane to think 17 more years it could be around, which is great for passengers. But Emirates president Tim Clark is begging Airbus to make a new version of the A380. They're begging. And of course, I think every passenger, I know, but every passenger in the world is, begging as well in a way, because everyone loves the A380. I'm sure Airbus employees love flying it too. It's just so heartbreaking to think that there are airlines that desperately want it, but we won't get it.
And for anyone wondering why we will not get it, just the bit of context there is that Airbus have actually stopped making the Airbus A380. They have formally closed down all A380 production in a significant way. And the last part of that was the complete end of the A380 final assembly line, which was in Toulouse. That factory facility now produces and assembles A321s and A320 family aircraft. It is the direction of the times. Airlines simply do not require the extremely large aircraft and instead want lighter, more efficient, more versatile aircraft that are able to meet the needs of both the long haul market and the mid market and perform on the efficiencies of typically a shorter range jet. And that's the direction of travel at the moment.
I just have to say, I wonder what will be the next pride of the airlines, because we had the 747, we had Concorde, now the A380. Once the A380 goes, it's going to be the first time when the A380 is finally retired from Emirates, like the first time in 7 decades, that there's not an obvious star, the aircraft that people seek out, an aircraft that attracts plane spotters.
This is going to be it for a long while now. I mean, I think it's going to be the A350, the 777X, and on we go. And of course, the market is very much shifting towards the extra long range A321s and the fact that we're sending shorter single aisle aircraft further afield on long range missions, and it's extremely efficient for airlines. It's not great for passengers in some senses. In other senses, it doesn't matter. We will dive into that in a new episode. But yeah, I think, as you correctly said, it's going to be a long while without an upcoming big, flashy flagship.
Oh, well, we do supposedly have supersonic coming again, but we'll believe
That's
it
true.
when we see
Yeah,
it.
that's true. Yeah, that's true. And hypersonic, and so we'll be,
Yeah.
we'll be traveling from A to B faster. And again, we'll get into that in a new episode, because that is something that certain manufacturers tell us, like Boom Aero, that it's definitely the reality. And then you get big engine manufacturers who were supposedly going to be powering the thing saying, no, we're
What
still
are they
very
talking
far from
about?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is unrealistic. So we will dive into that. But with that, I think we'll close up on this episode. Thank you, as always, for being part of the journey and for liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing on air as a podcast to your network, because
Yeah.
we appreciate it. We're seeing those stats. It's much appreciated.
It's so cool. And the reviews, we're so grateful if you review the podcast. Send us your thoughts, feedback via social media. Of course, we have a giveaway going that we mentioned in episode 3 that will be brought back or mentioned again next week. It's not over yet. So we will see you next week on air.
See you later.
Bye bye.